Thank you for joining us, Sharks Perspective, the podcast with subject matter experts in marketing. For today's marketer, it is imperative to look at your ad spend, to know who was targeted, who saw the ads, and whether or not they bought. Is your data consistent across all of your channels, or did you silo your campaigns? Quite simply, have you proven if your marketing actually works based upon the KPIs that you set? Chad Engelgau is the Chief Marketing Officer and Head of Strategy at Acxiom, one of the most well-respected data companies in the world. And he's a true subject matter expert at data-driven marketing. And on this episode, we'll discuss people-based marketing, the quality and ethical use of data, omni-channeling campaigns, attribution, and the changing role of the CMO. So let's tune in to a data-driven CMO with a data-driven shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Chad, thank you so much for joining us on A Shark's Perspective today. If you would please give us a brief overview on you and your own career up to the point of being the CMO at Acxiom.
Hey, well, thanks, Kenneth. And I guess it'd be fine if I could call you Shark.
Yes.
It's a great nickname.
Yes.
So I'm a 20-year veteran of the high-tech industry where I've held, various roles in engineering, product management, and marketing along the way. I've been with Acxiom most recently for 12 years. And with the recent sale of our company to the Interpublic Group, I've assumed the role of the Chief Marketing Officer and Head of Strategy for Acxiom.
That's great. So let's dive in then and talk about people-based marketing. And I think, a lot of marketers today have a general sense of data, but, I'm sure you've seen it as well, that a lot of them don't have a really good handle on people-based marketing. So if you would kind of help us elaborate on what it is and why it matters.
Yeah, absolutely, Shark. So I think what's a little interesting here is that people-based marketing shouldn't be seen as something new, even
Agreed.
though it's being touted as something fresh. But, who else have we been trying to engage for the last 100 years as we try to
Right.
sell products and services? All direct marketers have been marketing campaigns to people and measuring their campaigns for 40 plus years. Ironically, I'd say that it's recently come to the forefront lately due to the lack of transparency and the outright fraud in the ad tech world, where marketing to people is now something that, let's say, somebody who didn't grow up in the direct marketing world understands is critical. So I'd also say, people-based marketing matters because businesses themselves don't buy things. The people inside them do. You think about it, cookies, IP addresses, geolocations alone don't buy things. It's the real people behind them that do, the purchases or are interested in brands or new information or concepts or ideas. And so, you think about even devices really don't buy things today either, but one day they will, all without human intervention, just, pre-programmed guidance. So, anchoring your marketing and understanding at the end of the day, it's a person you want to have a transaction with, a relationship with, you want to educate or inform is critical. So what I'd really share is that if you're, buying audiences that can't be connected with a high level of confidence to real people, why are you spending that money as a marketer?
Oh, agreed. So with the amounts of data, and I got back from another conference this week where people again were touting the amounts of data, the amount of zettabytes of data that are being completed. There's so much data influx right now for marketers, and it's hard to wrap your arms around it. But how do marketers, should they handle the pace of data that's flooding them today, and what kind of guidance do you think we can take from how to use that data best to our advantage?
Well, that's a great question, Shark. The challenge marketers face is that they're being flooded, as you said, with signals, data from a wealth of data suppliers along with their MarTech and AdTech applications, but they're really thirsting for insights. These sources and systems are supposed to help us all connect specific audiences or manage the data with those interactions, but they often simply create more fragmentation. And so, the issue is that most of these solutions create data puddles, and they don't really help the marketer unify their data and manage it in a way that enables them to learn from the interactions as a unified set of signals. So, as a company, as we help a number of marketers and myself as a marketer trying to, revisit how we do things ourselves today to solve for this data and tech sprawl, what we're seeing from our clients is that the leading marketers are focusing on using a consistent set of data everywhere. They're looking to unify the data, unify everything at the data layer before activating it on campaigns, as well as unifying all of that data and all those signals after the campaigns. And ultimately, the data has to be controlled by them, the marketer, and managed by them more holistically.
Agreed.
To solve for this data deluge.
So, with there being so many options now for where someone can get data, buy data, or lease it, if you will, talk, if you will, a little bit about finding the best quality of data to find those targeted audiences for a campaign. I mean, obviously, all data providers are not alike. I've gotten so many calls from people trying to sell me their data, and we would quite often get into discussions about how I previously worked at Acxiom, and then they would try telling me that Acxiom was one of their customers and that they were one of the older companies, and then you turn out and find out it's like a 5-year-old company. But I always caution people, and this is not a sales pitch for necessarily any data provider, but not all are the same, and a lot of them have a small list and they append data from a lot of the big providers, but they're not necessarily getting the best quality of data for their campaigns. So if you will elaborate a little bit on how you see the quality of data and how that can impact a marketer.
Yeah, appreciate it. That's a good question. When I worked for Dell, they were one of the few direct technology companies there, and they got massive amounts of information directly from their end users, whether those were business transactions or transactions directly from consumer, and even how you accentuate that and make that data meaningful is critical. And then as an industry in general, when you kind of put it in the bucket of third-party data, it's been a challenge, and with more data becomes more challenges around transparency. So as part of the industry, I'd say, the DMA and the ANA, as well as the IAB and others, have spent the last year really focusing on creating what's called a data transparency label to help marketers, understand how data is sourced, how it's compiled, along with other things like how fresh is that data or what type of audience does that truly represent. And I'd say that, until this is adopted across the industry, marketers really need to ensure that the data they buy is coming from leading vendors that have a proven track record of performance and an ethical framework that surrounds that and processes inside the company. And I'd just say, to your point, Shark, it's, there are great companies out there like mine, Acxiom. There's Dun & Bradstreet, there's Oracle, and there's others that absolutely legally source all of their data and have data lineage tracked to the collection points. We are transparent and are leading the path in the ethical applications of data across the globe. And really, at the end of the day, these are the type of partners you want and need to be successful if you're a marketer.
Couldn't agree more. So, one of the things that I try to preach and I try to evangelize is taking an omni-channel approach to campaigns, and especially with messaging to consumers. I've always believed that, the confused buyer says no, and you still see a lot of campaigns with disparate information across different platforms and channels, but I believe a lot in using those same targeted audiences across multiple channels. The lists have proven to me and to a lot of the advertisers I've worked with and friends over the years to see a significant lift. But talk about how you would take that data and take an omni-channel approach to TV, to digital, to email, to direct mail, or to whatever channel, and obviously tie that journey together at the consumer level, with the sources of data that you use.
I would say this goes fundamentally back to people-based marketing. The ability to recognize people across channels, not just on your owned properties, your mobile apps, your website, your call centers, ensuring that everything you're doing from a direct mail perspective, email perspective is all tied together, but that you also are accountable and can manage those things through your channels and your publishers' partners is really critical at the core. I'd say, that executing campaigns that have deduplicated reach when activating across channels, and then measuring those campaigns at the individual or household level or company level is really critical for your marketing performance. This whole concept of identity is interesting in that identity proxies are okay when you have no other choice, but simply buying media based on a blind cookie-based audience or geo or non-transparent data set is truthfully just asking for ad spend leakage to fraud. It's just what's happening in the industry today. So, I also think about the optimization aspect of it, not suppressing
Exactly.
your known customers across channels as part of your prospect campaign, or even being able to reach those specific customers to cross-sell or upsell is really a must for a modern day performance-based marketer. Because if you don't even take those secondary steps, how are you truly not just wasting your money?
Completely.
And if you think of all of these tactics are available today to marketers, whether that's in TV, mobile, social, or display, the biggest challenge, as you mentioned earlier, is that um, there's still challenges with reach and then accuracy at which you can connect all this information together. But that said, our industry has to continue to improve in all of these areas to better serve the marketer, but it is already solid across the board today. So, why, is this critically important? I'd say for me personally and other marketers that we talk to, zero-based budgeting is facing most marketers today. If you consider the number of expanded channels, we're not going to get more money, and we must focus on these core capabilities if we hope to effectively map customer journeys or performance attribution measurement. And that the companies that really focus on getting these right tools and the transparency through their providers and their own, systems are ultimately going to garner more marketing dollars and be able to use them more effectively.
So to sort of put on your, devil's advocate hat, why do you think that a lot of marketers are not taking advantage of this?
I think some of it's education.
Yeah.
And so the people who grew up in the industry doing direct marketing fundamentally understand the need and have practiced the ability to identify specific populations, segment those, through MEC clusters, execute those campaigns, and measure the conversion rates. And there was a whole era of marketers that grew up in a digital first world who were savvier than people in technology a lot of ways and how the internet was working and these things about cookies and addressable marketing, so to speak, and
Mm-hmm.
all this technology. And as marketers, we set up individual siloed teams so they weren't really working across from each other. And so now, we have a whole bunch of people who are very digitally savvy, but don't apply direct marketing principles all the time. And their tools and technologies historically didn't even allow them to do that. And now we're in this age where, a lot of the tools and technologies can perform direct marketing best practices. And so organizations really have to come together, take, quote, the old school direct marketers experience and know-how, apply it across all channels where the new sexy, mobile, social display, addressable TV things exist, and unify our marketing organizations. And so that's going to take education. That's going to take, potentially organizational restructures, and it's going to take, work of vetting out your partners and taking ownership over all those data sources into a common area to know that you're consistently making the right decisions.
Agreed. Agreed. Let's go back and talk about
Yeah.
ethics as far as data is concerned. And I think that's extremely important, especially with all the things of what you mentioned about where you source your data, how it's sourced. I think a lot of the things that are happening now with the laws affect it. But talk a little bit about the value of getting your data from a provider that really spends time in the ethical use of data and how companies should really approach using that data on their own.
As I mentioned earlier, Shark, this is paramount in a post GDPR world
Agreed.
as legislation like this, and take, for example, the California Consumer Privacy Act that passed this year. This is going to hit the states in January 2020, and it's going to spread quickly. And there's already conversations, upwards of 16 to 17 different active bills across the country around
Wow.
increased transparency and requirements for consumers. So this is going to um, hit us in the States and already has for global companies like ours where we've addressed GDPR compliance globally. But I'd say at the end of the day, everything we do as people and as companies should be held up against a standard of ethics. And why ethics, if you think of that versus privacy or compliance? It's really because the cultural norms and varying laws that exist is really a spectrum that we all have to live in as people and experience as business people. And so, for example, what some people share just on social media as an example are willing to say in public, others, may not even be comfortable doing the same thing. But that's the spectrum of ethics and choice. And so, as an industry, we have and continue to align on, agree to, I'd say promote, and even enforce ethically driven level playing field in data. And that helps create value for us as individuals by getting meaningful content. And it creates efficiencies for businesses that use our data and technologies. So when it comes to ethics, let me talk a little bit or share a little bit about just some examples. So at Acxiom, when we talk about data, we don't sell data on any person under the age of 18.
Mm-hmm.
The Online Child Protective Act, COPA, allows data to be collected and used for people 13 and above. And you shouldn't manage or control any data for people under 13. But Acxiom as a company, because we choose to have an ethical standard set, we don't manage or sell data for anybody, under the age of 18. There's also certain types of data that we don't sell or allow to be used for certain marketing sectors because it's considered sensitive data or might be embarrassing to people. So it's just not worth the value. And then, there's other areas, certain categories that we won't allow our data to be used to market certain products or services that are legal, but, our data is not used for those type of products or services. So I'd also say, we adhere to the DMA and the ANA standards as well as the IAB through our self-governance frameworks. And we vet the companies who want to buy our data directly from us before we sell it to them. So ethics has to be something that a company partners have to be able to talk to, not just give lip service around. And it is something that's going to come more and more to the forefront, not just for providers like ourselves, but brands themselves as they're being held to the same level of standards through GDPR and the California Consumer Privacy Act going forward.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think for a lot of brands, unfortunately, they think of, using their data correctly by setting up an SFTP instead of an FTP and having somebody sign an NDA instead of actually going through a full-blown agreement and, having a safe haven type team, protect that data usage. And it's unfortunate that a lot of companies haven't taken that jump yet. So
I agree. I would just say there, I've talked to 30 CMOs about 2 weeks ago, and some compliance officers are saying we just have to throw out everything or we shouldn't collect any data.
Sure.
But that's the wrong approach as well. The paradox of compliance and compliance around consumer information is you have to do a better job managing it so that when you are asked to be transparent, you can have traceability on where did you collect this data, how did you collect this data, how long have you had it, how are you applying it, and then you can give the person the opportunity to change that information about them or suppress some or all of it. And then you have to remember that over time. And so the paradox of global compliance around data management is you have to do a better job. And then if you think about it strategically, the world's biggest companies are being built and are successful based on the back of their mastery over data.
Oh, agree.
So if you talk about FANG, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google, and others, their competitive differentiation in their marketplace is their mastery over data. They're going to be held to the same compliance of this, but they're not going to ditch their data. They're simply going to be compliant.
Agreed. So then let's talk a little bit, as you talked about tying that back from an ethics standpoint, I want to talk a little bit about closed loop attribution and the value of that. So, there are a lot of companies that are trying attribution and really trying to see, based on that Wanamaker quote of knowing where their ad spend went. Talk about the value, if you will, that certain data providers have where you're able to give true closed loop attribution. That's something I delivered hundreds of reports on when I worked there as well. But the capabilities are a lot different than a typical attribution report somebody would have with their campaign spend.
Yeah, it is. And it's a complex. I apologize, Sharks. I can't remember who I read this from this week, but it was great. It was one of the analysts. They said, your attribution models are wrong, but that doesn't mean you need to stop doing them.
Agree.
Right?
Great.
And so the truth is you have to figure out in a performance-based marketing world what's going on. And that takes a number of things. We go back what we talked about earlier. You have to be able to connect identity so you're talking about the ads were targeted at these specific people. We delivered it to those people. those people, whether it was at the individual or household level or business level, put back signals on one or more of our owned properties, and eventually some of those people convert. And so managing the identity around all those interactions consistently, holistically in a privacy compliant way, even if you anonymize it at the end of the day to put it at a segment level, you still need to do that and focus on that to achieve the insights necessary to continue to improve your performance. You mentioned data connectivity, Shark. If you use 15 different data vendors across the 15 different channels, just think about the noise that
Oh my Lord.
introduces
Absolutely.
to your, measurement. And so that goes back to my comment about a consistent use of data everywhere. Doesn't mean you have to have one data supplier, but it means that the data suppliers you work with have got to be able to deliver you a consistent set of data anchored on specific identifiers at the people, household, or business level, and allow you to apply that for your targeting, for your personalization, and for your measurement in order to reduce the noise that's happening in that measurement areas. And then at the end of the day, right, you got to wrap this all around people, right? It is people that bring all this together, your data scientists, the people that understand the difference between a fractional attribution model, the difficulties around what's called walled gardens, and your only
Right.
ability, like you said, in TV publishers and or Facebook to do closed loop measurement, but not omni-channel attribution. And how do you use those insights in their silo and apply it to the other campaigns and learn across all those things? That takes people and process along with the tools and technology we talked about earlier to really make this important. But it is absolutely something you have to be focused on in an omni-channel world, or you're going to continue to waste your marketing dollars.
Could not agree more. So, the CMO role continues to evolve, as you well know. And, as a CMO of one of the most well known data companies in the world, what advice do you give other CMOs as they start to approach today? If they're just listening to the show and they want to start approaching their data differently, as they approach overall use of data, whether it's third party or their own first party data, what kind of advice do you give them with how to best utilize data?
So I think, focusing on a couple of key things, be willing to ask for 5 whys all the time, whether you're talking about your agency, whether you're talking about the individual people, whether you're talking about your publisher platforms, etc. Why are we doing this things? Why can we not get this information? Why are we not able to get the reach we need? Why can we not consistently use data, right? Drilling down into the details is becoming critical for the chief marketing officer. And whether that's your data and your data suppliers, whether that's the tools and technologies that you have, or whether it's your agency relationships, getting into the details is critical because at the end of the day, you're the one that has to defend the marketing expend and the positive impact it creates for the revenue for the business.
Yeah, and it's not excusable for marketers within an organization to not use that data to to really gain those insights and know where their ad dollars are performing or being spent. But it is imperative at the CMO level to at least know that. I just know the pressures that are put on CMOs today is it's paramount to really survive. So, Chad, we've come to that momentous moment of the show. Are you ready for the 5 most important questions you're going to be asked today?
Oh, absolutely, Shark. Let's go.
First party data or Acxiom's award winning third party data?
Both.
Segments or personas?
Segments, when you can anchor the information to people, for sure. I mean, at the end of the day, segmentation means you actually have something real underneath it, and that's what you got to target.
Targeting or attribution?
Attribution, because that helps you know if your targeting actually worked and if your suppliers are delivering on all the things we talked about today.
So let's talk about where you graduated versus where the company was founded. Texas A&M or the Arkansas Razorbacks?
Oh, well, it's definitely Gigamags regardless. So win or lose, we're always Aggies.
And the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
I grew up in the Midwest, and so for me, it is cornbread. Anything cooked with corn
Yeah.
is something I have to try whenever I go out to eat. So, lover of corn, lover of the Midwest.
Well, Chad, where can people find out more about you, follow your thoughts and leadership, and find out more about the company?
Oh, thanks for asking, Shark. So, if people want to connect with me, of course, the best place to do that, just reach out via LinkedIn. The good news about a name like Chad Engelgau is there's only two of us, and one is clearly a lot younger than me and doing something different. So that's a good thing. You can also go to the Acxiom website where you can find my information under the About Us section. And I am also on Twitter, and I use the handle at Engelgau, Engelgau, and would love to connect with people there as well.
Chad, thank you so much for being on A Shark's Perspective.
Hey, thank you, Shark. Love your podcast. Lots of interesting guests, and really appreciate you inviting me on today.
Appreciate it. So there was my conversation with Chad Engelgau, the Chief Marketing Officer and Head of Strategy at Acxiom, one of the most well-respected data companies in the world, and he's a true subject matter expert at data-driven marketing. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from our conversation with him. First, when looking at data, remember that people-based marketing shouldn't be seen as something new. You're selling products and services to people. Even with B2B, as Chad said, it matters because businesses don't buy things. It's the real people behind those walls that do. And at the end of the day, your relationship, why you're using this data, is because of the ability to recognize people across channels, and that is critical. While there are some challenges with reach and addressable, that's often overcome with a better campaign execution, the closed-loop measurement that's real instead of guesstimated or modeled, and most importantly, it prevents ad spend leakage. These tactics are available today so that you can do this at the segment level, at a household, or even better at an individual level. And omni-channel your campaigns, or be able to prove why siloing those campaigns is better. But I'm betting you can't. Know the persons and people you're targeting across multiple channels. Make the campaigns work together with a consistent set of data everywhere. Know who saw the ads and prove that your marketing campaigns work. Second, we have a lot of people now who are digitally savvy but don't connect their tools like the old school traditional marketers did. And as marketers, we consume an enormous amount of data today that wasn't available not that long ago. But how are you ingesting that? As he said, the leading marketers are focusing on using a consistent set of data everywhere. They're looking to unify everything at the data layer before activating it on campaigns, as well as unifying all of that data and all of those signals after the campaigns. And ultimately, the data has to be controlled by them, the marketer, and managed by them more holistically in order to solve for this data deluge. I couldn't agree more. Third, I can't stress this enough, and I quote, marketers really need to ensure that the data they buy is coming from leading vendors that have a proven track record of performance and an ethical framework that surrounds that, and processes inside the company. Ethical use of data is something you should be able to speak to as an organization. When you consider GDPR, the California law, and other state laws that are coming, everything we do as marketers should be held up against the standard of ethics. Your customers expect that, and honestly, you owe it to them, or else many customers will take their dollars and go to brands who use their ethical use of data as a competitive advantage. And a rare fourth, I've spoken about this often on several shows, but the role of the CMO is changing, and not fast enough in my opinion. It is imperative that they lead the change within their teams to know exactly where their ad spend is going. Famed American merchant John Wanamaker once said, half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I don't know which half. If a CMO said that to his board today, then he'd likely be out of work. Data-driven attribution is key, and as Chad said, it's absolutely something you have to be focused on in an omni-channel world, or you're going to continue to waste your marketing dollars. How else will you know whether or not your targeting was done correctly? Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. It's been my honor to share this podcast with you in order to discuss another one of the many components that makes up marketing today. Whatever your title is, go be your own amazing chief marketing officer and a better data-driven marketer. And remember that a goal is just a wish without a plan. So join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.